Hello friends, here I am with new story. I hope you all like the video and subscribe to my channel. So let's start the video with summary. The three virgin goddesses created a child together with a man all three fell in love with. They all three loved the child unconditionally. This child will play a pivotal role in things to come that none would expect. He will help the child of prophecy in his role. Naruto, son of the three virgin goddesses. Book 1, The Lightning Thief. Chapter 1. The three goddesses Artemis, Athena, and Hestia had decided to spend the day together with each other in the mortal world. On Hestia's suggestion, they decided to spend the day walking around NYC to see the sights. I'm so glad you suggested this, Hestia. It's been a while since we have been able to just walk around relaxed like this. A woman with long black hair and piercing gray eyes named Athena said happily. Yes, I agree with Athena on this, Hestia. Though I think it would be better if there were more wooded areas around. A woman with curly auburn hair and silver eyes named Artemis said, causing the other two to groan good-naturedly at her. Yes, this was one of my better ideas, wasn't it? You would say that, Artemis, you love the wilderness. A woman with brown hair and flames for eyes named Hestia then stated amusedly. All three then broke out laughing as they continued on their way around the city, with Athena pointing out important buildings or other creations as they went. Later on that day, as they were turning a corner down a less busy street, they came upon the sight of a tall blonde man battling a hellhound with a sword. They were surprised to see him and figured he was a demigod. As the man finished slaying the hellhound, he turned around to see the three women walking towards him. Hello, young man, I am the goddess Hestia and these two are Artemis and Athena. We were wondering who you were and who your godly parent is, Hestia asked as they reached him. The man immediately dropped to one knee in front of them. My name is Minato Namikaze, my ladies. I am sorry to say that I am not a demigod. I'm just a clear-sighted mortal who teaches genjutsu in the local area. The man, now known as Minato, stated as he stood up. Then how did you get a hold of the weapons you used? Athena asked inquisitively while still shocked that he was a clear-sighted mortal. My lady, I gained these blades from a centaur near the edge of town and used them to protect the people around here from the monsters, as they cannot see them as I can. Minato stated respectfully. You must think you're a great man for doing this and can do whatever you want, right? Artemis asked disdainfully, getting a sigh from the other two goddesses at her tone. No, my lady, I consider it an honor to protect these people and believe that them being safe is all the reward I need for what I do. That is why I train so much and teach others my art. Minato stated respectfully to her, receiving a shocked look from her as she could tell he wasn't lying to her. Well, young man, I believe it is time for us to go now. We must get back to our work as goddesses, Hestia said in a kind voice while smiling. Yes, my lady, I hope to meet you three again in my lifetime. Goodbye, Minato said while bowing to each of them in turn. He then closed his eyes as they flashed away. Back on Olympus, the three goddesses had reappeared in Hestia's temple. Well, today was fun and meeting that mortal was very insightful. I really liked him, Hestia said happily. Yes, it was rather refreshing to finally meet a humble and kind man for once, Artemis said thoughtfully. Yes, I agree with you both on the man. He seemed like he would be good to engage in conversation with, Athena said wistfully. They parted ways a few minutes later after saying their goodbyes and headed back to their duties. Several years later, the three goddesses had decided to go walking around NYC again and hoped to come upon the mortal Minato again to talk with him. I wonder if we will run into him today like we did then? Athena asked thoughtfully. We might, you never know, Hestia said while smiling. Yes, it would be good to talk with him about the monster population here, Artemis said while looking around the area. The three continued on their way happily. They noticed they were coming upon the area they met the man at before and started looking around for him. Suddenly they heard a pain groan and noticed a trail of blood leading to a side street and followed it cautiously. They gasped when they found Minato sitting against a wall with a hole through his stomach. Minato, what happened to you? Hestia asked with a pained look on her face. My lady, I was injured by the Minotaur, Minato said through gasps. The three goddesses gasped at that. I'm afraid your wound is fatal, Minato, and we have no way to heal you. I am sorry, Athena said sadly after inspecting his wound. It is alright, my lady, I knew I wasn't going to make it when I was injured, Minato gasped out. Conserve your strength, Minato, and don't talk too much. I will try to ease the pain for you, Artemis said sadly as she used a rare power she had to dull the pain for him. Thank you, my lady, for that, Minato said as he smiled at them. They sat with him for a while before they noticed he was starting to fade. It is almost time, I can feel it. My only regret is that I never had a family of my own because I dedicated myself to protecting the innocents around me. Minato said sadly before his life left him. Three goddesses looked at him sadly for a moment before looking at each other and nodding. Let's grant his last regret for him. Hestia said sadly as she bent down and collated some of his blood. Yes, I believe he is the one man worthy of this. Artemis said as she cut her arm and let her ichor pull into Hestia's hand along with Minato's. Yes, I agree, he is more deserving than most people of this honor. Athena said as she mimicked Artemis with her own ichor. With my ichor as the final component, I create a child for Minato Namikaze to have a family. Hestia said as she added her own ichor and mixed it all together. A flash happened and then died down, and there in Hestia's arms was a child that was a spitting image of his father, except he had two different colored eyes, one silver and one gray. He also had whisker marks on his cheeks. He is so cute, isn't he, Artemis? Hestia asked while looking at him. Yes, he is very cute. I wonder why he has whisker marks on his cheeks though? Artemis asked with a smile on her face. That is probably something he got from you, Artemis. After all, you are the goddess of the hunt and wilderness. Athena stated while tickling the little baby. The other two agreed with Athena's thoughts, and then Artemis did something and Minato's body disappeared. What should we name him? Artemis asked thoughtfully. How about Naruto Namikaze in honor of his father? Hestia said happily. I agree, that is a splendid name, Hestia. Athena said happily. The three began to walk around happily while talking and cooing at Naruto. As it got later, they began to discuss on what to do with him since they couldn't raise him themselves as it was against the gods' laws. Where will we take him, Hestia? Minato had no family to take him in. Artemis asked her. We will have to take him to an orphanage and leave him there, Hestia said sadly. I know just the place. It's run by a daughter of Demeter. So we can show ourselves to her and make sure he is well taken care of. Athena said happily. The others smiled at this news and nodded as they flashed to the place. They reappeared on a long dirt road surrounded by woods on the outskirts of Long Island. I already like this place, it's secluded and surrounded by woods, Artemis said happily as they began walking down the road. Yes, I knew you would, Artemis. It's an orphanage specifically made for demigod children. It even has a shield around it to keep out monsters. Athena explained to them. So who is this daughter of Demeter that runs this place, Athena? Hestia asked expectantly. Oh, her name is Stephanie Ramirez. She wanted to give demigod children who hadn't come of age yet and had no family left a place to live till she could take them to camp. Athena explained happily as they turned the corner in the road and saw the orphanage in the distance. Well, there it is, let's hurry so we can talk to her before it gets too late, Hestia said as they sped up to get there quickly. As they arrived at the door, a tall woman with long brown hair and kind green eyes walked out to meet them. When she realized who they were, she bowed her head to them in respect. How may I help you, my ladies? She asked in a soft voice. Stephanie, we would like you to take in our child here till he is of age to go to Camp Half-Blood, Athena answered in an equally soft voice. I would be honored to, my ladies, Stephanie said as she looked towards Naruto, who was asleep in Hestia's arms. Thank you, Stephanie, for doing this for us, Hestia said in a kind voice. Stephanie bowed her head to her with a smile on her face. May we come in for a moment? We wish to leave a few things with you for him, Artemis asked her nicely. Yes, please come on in, my ladies, Stephanie said as she held the door open for them. She then led them up a set of stairs and to her office on the second floor. Now may I see what you have left for him? Stephanie asked softly. Artemis nodded her head and pulled out a necklace with a pendant of a moon surrounded by a bow on it and handed it to her. This is a special necklace that will turn into a bow for him when he pulls on the bow pendant, Artemis explained as Stephanie nodded and placed it in a drawer on her desk. Artemis then snapped her hand and a fox appeared and looked at her. I would also like to leave Kurama here with Naruto as protection for him. He is an enchanted fox, she said as Stephanie nodded as the fox moved to her side. Athena then stepped forward and snapped her fingers. When the flash died down, a red sock hat and a thick book on mythology with a note appeared on Stephanie's desk. I am leaving Naruto one of my invisibility caps that will work by mental command, and one of my personal books on mythology with a note for him, Athena said as Stephanie placed them in her desk with a nod. Hestia then handed Naruto over to Artemis and pulled out a Zippo and handed it to Stephanie. That is a 2-in-1 gift. It will work like a regular lighter to always give him a flame to use his powers with. Also, when he pushes in on the engraving of a sword while thinking about a sword, it will turn into a katana for him, Hestia said as she watched Stephanie call out the katana form of the sword. The katana had a celestial bronze blade with a plain silver rectangular guard and black wrappings on the handle. Stephanie nodded as the katana turned back into the Zippo and she placed it back into her desk. I will make sure he receives them when he is old enough, my ladies, Stephanie said as she bowed her head to them. Thank you, Stephanie, Hestia said happily. We must go now before the other gods start wondering where we are, Athena said unhappily as she kissed Naruto on the head. Please take good care of him for us, Stephanie, Artemis said as she handed him to Stephanie after she and Hestia had kissed him on the head as well. I will, my ladies, to the best of my abilities, Stephanie said. Thank you. We also leave $10,000 to help take care of him, they said together as they flashed away back to Olympus. After they were gone, Stephanie looked down at Naruto and smiled. He is going to be a strong demigod, she thought as she left her office and headed to the nursery just down the hall. When she arrived, she placed Naruto into one of the cribs and placed Kurama into the crib beside him. 6 years later, a spiky blonde-haired boy could be seen out in the woods around the orphanage leaning against a tree reading a thick book on mythology which he loved to learn about. He was a special boy with the trochromatic eyes, one was silver and the other was gray. He had whisker marks on his cheeks. He was wearing a necklace around his neck with a pendant of a moon surrounded by bow. He had on an orange shirt and green camouflage pants and combat boots on his feet. He also had a Red Sox hat on his head and he was flicking his Zippo open and closed absent-mindedly in his left hand. Suddenly he looked up and to his left as he heard a voice calling out his name. He closed his book with a groan and got up and headed in the direction of the voice to see Stephanie waiting for him at the edge of the woods. Naruto, where have you been? You were supposed to be back 30 minutes ago? Stephanie asked in a sharp tone as she saw him walking towards her. Sorry, I lost track of time while reading my book you gave me from my mom, Naruto said sheepishly while rubbing the back of his head. Stephanie's look softened at that as she shook her head exasperatedly. Naruto, you need to start being more aware when you're doing things, she said as she grabbed his hand and led him back towards the orphanage. I know and I'm sorry, I'll try to fix that, Naruto said as he looked ahead towards the entrance of the orphanage. Well, come on Naruto, we need to get you sorted for a new school since you got kicked out of the last one, Stephanie said in a soft tone as she knew Naruto hated not being able to stay in one school for longer than a year. Yeah, I know, I hate that I got kicked out of my last one, Naruto said sadly as he looked down. Till he was tackled by an orange blur causing him to cry out in shock and Stephanie to laugh out loud. When Naruto got over his shock and had pushed what had tackled him off of him, he had looked to see it was Kurama and smiled. Thanks buddy, I needed that, Naruto said as he scratched Kurama behind his ear. Kurama yipped at Naruto and snuggled into his hand more. Slowly Naruto got up while holding Kurama and he and Stephanie made their way inside and up to her office. They spent a few hours there finding a school that would take Naruto as a student. Finally they found one called Gensi Academy that had agreed to take Naruto as a student. They agreed it would be best for him as it was a boarding school and Naruto could stay there during the school year and come back during the summer. Well, now that we have found a school for you Naruto, we can take it easy for now, Stephanie said as she smiled at him. Do you think they will let me continue my Kenjutsu training there as my school for it is close by? Naruto asked hopefully. I don't see why not Naruto, but you will have to talk to them about it and set something up, Stephanie said while smiling at him. Naruto had nodded at that then asked if he could go back outside for a while. Stephanie had sighed then and allowed him to go back outside and play. Naruto had hopped up at that and grabbed Kurama and made a beeline for the front door. Once he was outside he let Kurama jump to the ground and they took off towards the woods again. So what do you think of my new school, Kurama? Naruto asked the fox once they were a good ways in. As long as they don't mind me being there, I think it will be a good place for you, Kurama said back in a series of yips. Yeah, I guess you're right, I just hope nothing too bad happens while we're there, Naruto said, receiving a nod of agreement from the fox. After that they spent a good portion of the day just hanging out in the woods with Naruto practicing his kenjutsu and archery skills. That night Naruto stayed up to stare at the full moon, which always had the effect of calming him down and helping him clear his thoughts so he could think more clearly. During these times Naruto would usually spend it thinking about his parents, his mom or moms, if he could believe some of the stuff Stephanie would tell him in particular, and wonder who they were and where they were. He would also think about his many talents and gifts he had during this time as well, like his abilities in archery and kenjutsu, and whether his parents had these abilities as well. A gift he had that he always wondered about was his photographic memory and how it helped him in his schooling even though he had ADHD and dyslexia. After a few hours of these thoughts, Naruto finally let himself drift off to sleep while still watching the full moon. 6 years later, Naruto had changed a lot. During this time he had garnered a reputation at Yancy as one of the silent bad boys who was also the smartest in his grade. He had also made 2 friends in Percy Jackson and Grover Underwood. Many people were skeptical about their friendship as they were very different in a lot of ways, but just shrugged it off. Currently Naruto was in his room preparing for the day as they had a field trip for their Latin class that day. Naruto had decided to dress in his black shirt that had a design of an owl with a moon in the background flying over a sea of flames on the front. He also wore his customary camouflage pants and black combat boots. Around his neck he wore his moon and bow pendant, and on his head his Red Sox hat. As he was leaving his room to head to his Latin classroom, he grabbed the Zippo off his dresser and placed it in his pocket. As he was walking he thought back to the summer before, where Stephanie had finally revealed the truth to him about his mothers being Olympian goddesses. He had been skeptical at first until Stephanie showed him irrefutable proof of the gods being real by using her powers and explaining that she was a daughter of Demeter. After he had learned that he had doubled his studies into Greek mythology and his weapons practices, he had also learned of the abilities of his hat, pendant, and Zippo at that time then too. He had also spent most of that summer trying to figure out who his mothers were among the goddesses, but when he couldn't, Stephanie had just told him to wait and he would find out when he arrived at Camp Half-Blood and they claimed him. Naruto came out of his thoughts as he came to his Latin classroom's door. He took a deep breath to calm himself and entered the room. When he looked around he saw most of his classmates already there, including Percy and Grover. He could also see Mr. Brunner at the front of the class in his wheelchair and nodded to him as he walked past him to where Percy and Grover were at. A few minutes later and the door opened to allow Mrs. Dodds into the room. Naruto scowled at her as she was one of his most hated teachers and he knew that she was actually a fairy. He just didn't know why she was here. He saw Mr. Brunner stiffen a little in his chair at her entrance but then relax, as she nodded to him, signaling that the bus was ready for them. "Well class, it's time for us to head out. Please form a line and follow Mrs. Dodds to where the bus is," Mr. Brunner said in his usual kind voice. A few minutes later Naruto was on the bus in a seat across from Grover and Percy, watching as Percy got mad at Nancy Bobuffet, who was throwing pieces of her sandwich at Grover and laughing as it got stuck in his hair. He finally got tired of it when he saw Percy about to get himself in trouble while Grover was trying to stop him. "Nancy, if you don't stop you'll be next on my list," Naruto said in an innocent tone, causing Nancy to freeze and start sweating. She could remember the last person who had been on his list and didn't want to be added to it. "Okay, I'll stop, but why do you keep hanging around them? They're losers," Nancy asked hesitantly. "Because they're better company than you are, Nancy," Naruto answered as he turned away from her. They had been at the museum for a while now and Naruto and his 2 friends were at the back of the group while commenting on how some of the things would be fun to do, like riding the chariots. When Mr. Brunner had led the group up to a tall stone column that he called a stele, a grave marker for a girl about their age, they had suddenly found themselves at the front of the group and had been trying to pay close attention to Mr. Brunner, but a group of people behind them were talking too loud for them to hear him properly. "Can you guys shut up?" Percy finally said angrily. "Mr. Jackson, do you have something you would like to say?" Mr. Brunner asked, clapping his hand together. "No sir," Percy mumbled out while the others snickered at him until they saw Naruto giving them the evil eye. "Well then perhaps you could tell me what is happening in the picture." Mr. Brunner said, motioning to a picture on the stele that showed a man with a child in his hand and his mouth wide open. Well, that's Kronos eating his kids, Percy said as he gained some confidence after recognizing the pictures. Yes, and he did this because? Mr. Brunner asked, obviously not satisfied. Well, Percy began, not sure of the reason. He was the king of the Titans and he didn't trust his kids, the gods. So he ate them, but his wife Rhea hid baby Zeus, and gave him a rock to eat instead. Then when Zeus was older he tricked his father into barfing up his brothers and sisters, then there was a war and the gods won. Naruto supplied for Percy, who smiled thanking Naruto. Some of the girls in the class went EWWWW when the comment about barfing was mentioned. That is correct, Mr. Brunner said. Then the world became ruled by the 12 Olympian gods, with the strongest being Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. He added as he pointed out 3 small figures on the stele. Ever since they overthrew their father they have been rivals ever since. Mr. Brunner added after a few minutes of silence. On many occasions the gods came down to earth, and how should I put this? Mr. Brunner said in thought before Naruto spoke up. They hooked up because they couldn't keep it in their pants, he said, causing everyone to laugh including Mrs. Dodds and Mr. Brunner. That is correct, Mr. Namikaze. Can you tell me the correct terms for these children? Mr. Brunner asked him. They were called demigods, I believe, part mortal, part god. Naruto said, receiving a nod from Mr. Brunner. Could you name me some of these demigods? Mr. Brunner asked, directing the question towards Naruto. Let's see, there was Hercules and Perseus, they were sons of Zeus. Then there was Theseus and he was a son of Poseidon. Naruto said in answer, receiving a nod from Mr. Brunner. That is correct. Very good, Mr. Namikaze. It's good to see that you pay attention in class, Mr. Brunner said with a small smile on his face. However, they heard snickers coming from the group behind them and Nancy Bobafett saying, like we're going to use this in real life. Like it's going to say on our job applications, please explain why Kronos ate his kids or name a demigod. She continued to snicker for a few minutes longer after saying that. And why, Mr. Jackson? Mr. Brunner asked. To paraphrase Mrs. Bobafett's excellent question, does this matter in real life? Percy thought about the question for a moment. I'm sorry, sir, but I really don't know. Percy finally said. And how about you, Mr. Namikaze? He asked Naruto. Well, sir, there are many ways this could matter in real life. You could get a job like an architect or mythologist where this pertains to your field of study. Or there are some other ways, but most of them would cause people here to call me crazy. Naruto answered, causing Mr. Brunner and Mrs. Dodds to narrow their eyes at him for a moment. I see, Mr. Brunner said after a moment. Well, have credit to you both. On that note, it's time for lunch. Mrs. Dodds, would you lead us back outside? Mr. Brunner said, then asked. She nodded, then led the students back down the hallway. It wasn't till a few minutes later that Naruto realized that Percy wasn't with him and looked around, seeing him having a conversation with Mr. Brunner. He shrugged, realizing it was none of his business, and started to look around to see if there was anything he hadn't seen yet. When they were near the end of the hallway, Naruto saw an area off to the side that had statues of the goddesses with the 3 virgin goddesses in the center. He approached their statues, feeling drawn to them. Interesting, aren't they? He heard a voice say and turned around to see Mr. Brunner at the entrance to the area. Yes, they are. I don't know why, but I feel drawn to them, Naruto said as he turned back around to look at the statues again. Naruto, I was wondering if you could tell me what the rest of your answer to my question would have been? Mr. Brunner asked while staring at the statues as well. I guess I could, sir. You see, this would also matter in real life if you were like me, and I'm starting to believe Percy is as well, and have gods or goddesses as parents. Naruto answered, causing Mr. Brunner's eyes to widen. How do you know? Mr. Brunner asked. Do you know that orphanage that is run by Stephanie Ramirez? Naruto asked, receiving a nod from Mr. Brunner. Well, I was raised there by her, Naruto explained, getting a look of understanding from Mr. Brunner. Ah, and she must have explained about the gods to you last summer in preparation of you going to Camp Half-Blood this summer, Mr. Brunner reasoned aloud. That's right, but I still don't know who my godly parents are. All I know is that they are 3 of the goddesses, Naruto said, getting a surprised look from Mr. Brunner. I see, said Mr. Brunner with a contemplative look on his face. Well, I'm going to go back out to eat lunch, Mr. Brunner, Naruto said as he left the area after casting one last look at the 3 goddesses' statues. Mr. Brunner sat there for a moment longer looking at the three goddesses' statues while thinking, I wonder if it would explain his eyes and why he likes flames. After a few more minutes he shrugged and headed outside after Naruto. The class had commandeered the museum steps in the fountain wall for seats to eat their lunch. Up in the sky it looked like a big storm was brewing as some huge dark clouds were moving in over the city. Naruto remembered seeing on the news lately that floods, hurricanes, and storms were forming all over the world, leaving scientists baffled about the weather. Then there were the guys he saw more often with signs saying the end is near. Naruto sat on the edge of the fountain near Percy and Grover as they ate their lunch and chatted about different things. You get detention again? Grover asked, looking at Percy. Nah, not from Brunner. I just wish he would lay off me sometimes. I mean, I'm not a genius, Percy said, looking unhappily at his sandwich. Well, we already knew that, Percy, Naruto said, getting a punch in the arm from Percy. Okay. Can I have your apple? Grover said, shrugging, getting a chuckle out of Naruto as Percy handed over his apple. Naruto looked out at his class to see some of the boys pelting birds with small rocks. I swear boys are stupid sometimes, Naruto mumbled, then stopped as he realized what he just said. Why did I just say that? He thought to himself. The three began to chat about what they might do over the summer, when Naruto noticed Nancy and her goons approaching their location. He saw her pretend to trip and dump her lunch all over Grover. Oops, she said, grinning while her friends snickered at Grover. Percy jumped up angry, but Naruto stopped him while staring at Nancy with narrowed eyes. You just made my list, Boba Fett. Be prepared, Naruto said icily, causing Nancy and her friends to pale and scamper away to another side of the fountain. Grover looked relieved, but Percy still looked angry and kept his eyes on Nancy. That's when something weird and unexplained happened. Nancy suddenly fell into the fountain, making a loud and audible splash, making everyone look at her, and caused Mrs. Dodds to come over. MRS. Dodds, Percy and Naruto just pushed me, Nancy cried out, but neither Naruto or Percy were paying attention. Percy was trying to figure out what happened, and Naruto had narrowed his eyes as he had seen the tentacle of water pull Nancy into the water. It had confirmed his suspicions on Percy being a demigod. He just didn't know who his parent was. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Namake's come with me now, Mrs. Dodds said after she had made sure Nancy was alright. Wait, it was me, I pushed her, Grover said suddenly while trying to stand up without his crutches. Mrs. Dodds wasn't buying it and led Naruto and Percy back into the museum. Damn it, Grover mumbled to himself as he tried to get Mr. Brunner's attention. Naruto and Percy were following Mrs. Dodds deeper into the museum and noticed that there were no people around the area. Naruto narrowed his eyes and figured that Mrs. Dodds was finally making her move, but he couldn't figure out what her motivation was. They soon arrived in an area of the museum with a statue of Hades at the back of the room. Mrs. Dodds turned around to them once they were in the room and focused on Percy. Now honey, did you really think we didn't know it was you? Mrs. Dodds asked, focusing on Percy, causing Naruto to narrow his eyes at her. I'm sorry, Percy said as the first thing to come to mind. Now then, confess and we may take it easy on you, she said, causing Percy and Naruto to grow confused. What are you talking about? Naruto asked her. Oh yes, Mr. Namikaze, I figured you might have something to do with this as well, so tell your friend to hand it over or else, Mrs. Dodds said, confusing them more. Just what am I supposed to have? Percy asked her, causing her to get mad. Stop acting like you don't know what I'm talking about, honeys, Mrs. Dodds said angrily. But we don't, Percy began before Mrs. Dodds interrupted him. That's it, I'm going to kill you and take it from you, Mrs. Dodds said as she began to transform into a monster with beady black eyes, gray skin, and leathery black wings. Naruto pulled on his necklace, transforming it into his bow, as Percy looked at her in shock. Now tell me where the lightning bolt is, Mrs. Dodds shouted as she took to the air to dodge a flaming arrow from Naruto. Before anything else could happen, the boys heard a shout. Percy, turn around. They turned around to see Mr. Brunner throwing something towards Percy from the entrance. Percy caught it and looked to see it was a pen. Uncap it, Percy, Mr. Brunner said urgently. Percy did, and the pen suddenly transformed into a sword. Wow, Percy said. Percy, now isn't the time, focus on this thing, Naruto said, causing Percy to nod and take a swing at her with the sword right as Naruto shot an arrow at her. both connected at the same time, causing Mrs. Dodds to let out a scream and turn into gold dust. Percy was shocked and turned to Naruto to see him just standing there with no weapon. "What was that just now?" Percy asked as he looked at the pen in his hand that had just been a sword. "I don't know, Percy. Let's get out of here," Naruto said, convincingly enough to get a nod from Percy. As they reached the exit of the museum, they were approached by Nancy. "Where have you idiots been? Mrs. Kerr is about to take us back into the museum," she said, sneering at them. "Who the hell is Mrs. Kerr?" Percy asked while Naruto narrowed his eyes at the name. But all they got from her was her rolling her eyes and walking away muttering idiots. They both also noticed her clothes were now completely dry instead of wet. They then walked up to Grover and asked him the same thing, and he gave the same answer but was stuttering slightly, so they knew he was lying. So they focused their attention on Mr. Brunner instead. Mr. Brunner looked up a little distracted. "Oh, that would be my pen. Please remember to bring your own writing utensil in the future, Mr. Jackson," he said. "I'm okay," Percy said, looking confused as he handed over the pen to Mr. Brunner, who put it into his front pocket. "Sir, where is Mrs. Dodds?" Percy asked. "Who?" Mr. Brunner asked him, confused. "The other chaperone. Mrs. Dodds, the pre-algebra teacher," Percy asked as Naruto looked Mr. Brunner in the eye and winked and received a slight nod back. Mr. Brunner let a frown appear on his face, and sat forward, slightly concerned. "Percy, Naruto, there is no Mrs. Dodds on this trip. As far as I know, there has never been a Mrs. Dodds at Yancy Academy. Are you both feeling all right?" Mr. Brunner said in confusion. "Say what?" Percy asked, not believing what he was hearing. "You boys may have just got Mrs. Kerr's name mixed up with someone else, perhaps a past teacher at an old school. Don't worry about it, boys," Mr. Brunner said before wheeling off. "Come, it's time to head back into the museum, boys." As Mr. Brunner wheeled off, Percy looked at Naruto with a dumbfounded look on his face, with only one thing coming to mind to describe what just happened. "What the hell?" he said, causing Naruto to crack up laughing. Naruto, son of the Three Virgin Goddesses, Book 1, The Lightning Thief, Chapter 2. It was weeks after the incident at the museum and people had still denied Mrs. Dodds' existence. Naruto had watched Percy spend days after the trip questioning everyone about Mrs. Dodds, but they would always look at him as if he had gone insane. Every one of them had said there had never been a Mrs. Dodds at Yancy and that Mrs. Kerr had been the math teacher since winter break ended. Naruto was relieved at that, as Percy was not yet ready to learn the truth about himself. However, there was one person who could not completely convince Percy and let him realize something was up, much to Naruto's ire and Percy's happiness. Grover had always been a bad liar. When he lied, he stuttered, his brow began to get a little sweaty, and he always tried to avoid people's gazes. This is exactly what happened when Percy asked him about Mrs. Dodds. He would say he didn't know what Percy was talking about and that there had never been a teacher by that name at Yancy before. But Percy knew he was lying every time. Naruto made a mental note to teach Grover how to lie better when everything had settled down. Naruto had also spent this time getting payback on Nancy. He had already done numerous pranks on her, like paint bombing her room, hanging all her clothes from the school's flagpole, and pinning her to the wall with staples and a sign saying, "Please return this rabid animal to the wild where it belongs." It left the whole school in hysterics, and made Nancy avoid them like the plague. But right now the two were in Percy's dorm room studying for their upcoming Latin exam, or in Percy's case, trying to study. Grover had gone for a walk to clear his head, so it was just the two of them studying. "Ugh, this is impossible," Percy groaned as he threw his Latin textbook against the wall. "I try to read, but it either goes in one ear and out the other, or the words get all scrambled up," he said, sighing. "Don't give up, Percy, you'll get it eventually. I mean, we have dyslexia, it's always going to be harder for us than others," Naruto said, looking up from his book one of his moms had left him. This coming from the guy with a photographic memory, that also likes learning this stuff. Percy said grouchily. Naruto shrugged at that and looked back down at his book. "I can't control the fact I have that kind of memory, and as for liking this stuff, my mom liked it, so I do. It helps me feel closer to her," Naruto said back in answer. Percy looked down for a second at that, then picked his textbook up off the floor. "How am I supposed to remember difference between Chiron and Karen? It's completely the same," Percy said, aggravated. "Well, besides the fact that one has an I in it and the other has an A in it, One trains heroes and the other ferries the dead, Naruto explained looking up from his book. Percy just sighed in aggravation at his textbook. Why don't you ask Mr. Brunner for help? I'm sure he is still in his office, and since you are one of his favorite students, I'm sure he will give you a few tips. Naruto said, closing and laying down his book. Do you think that would be okay? Percy asked, hopefully looking up from his book slowly. I don't see why not. He is a teacher after all. So if a student needs help, he is supposed to help, right? I'll come with you, I could use the break anyway, Naruto said, standing up and stretching. Okay, let's do it, and thanks, Percy said, standing up and receiving a nod from Naruto. They left the room and headed towards their Latin teacher's office. As the two approached Mr. Brunner's office, they noticed his lights were still on and the door was open a little. As Percy was about to walk in, they heard voices inside and were surprised to find Grover talking with Mr. Brunner. Curiosity got the better of them and they leaned in closer so they could better hear what was being said. Word about Percy and Naruto, sir, they heard Grover say, surprising them both. Usually it was the other way around. Alone this summer, Grover was saying, I mean, a kindly one in school. Now that we know for sure, and they know too. We would only make matters worse by rushing them, Mr. Brunner said. We need Percy to mature more in Naruto, so you don't need to worry about him. But they may not have time. The summer solstice deadline Grover begun before being cut off. Will have to be resolved without Percy. Let him enjoy his ignorance while he still can, and as I said, Naruto can handle himself, Mr. Brunner said in a strict tone. Sir, they saw her. Grover began to be cut off again. His imagination, Mr. Brunner insisted. The mist over both the students and staff will be enough to convince him of that. But he has been asking questions, sir. I don't know how much longer I can lie to him. Grover said sadly. You have to, Grover. I know it's difficult and that they're your friends now, but it will be safer, Mr. Brunner said in a kind tone. Sir, I can't fail in my duties again. Grover's voice was full of emotion. You know what that would mean. You haven't failed, Grover, Mr. Brunner said kindly. I should have seen her for what she was. Now let's just worry about keeping Naruto and Percy alive until next fall. Thud. Mr. Brunner stopped talking when Percy accidentally dropped his textbook, causing a loud thud to echo throughout the hallway. Damn! Naruto thought before he grabbed Percy's arm and the textbook and quietly ran back to their dorm room. Back in the hallway, Mr. Brunner spoke. Nothing, he mumbled. My nerves haven't been right since the winter solstice. Mine either, Grover said. But I could have sworn. Go back to your dorm, Mr. Brunner told him. You have a long day of exams tomorrow. Don't remind me, Grover groaned out. The lights turned out in Mr. Brunner's office and the two left, but as the two walked a strange clopping sound echoed. Back in the dorm room, Grover walked in to see Naruto and Percy studying, with Percy at the desk, and Naruto on Percy's bed leaning against the wall. Hey guys, Grover said as he walked in and sat down on his bed. Hey Grover, Percy and Naruto said together. Man, Percy, you look terrible. Grover said. It's just all this studying, Grover, you know how it is, Percy said. As Percy and Grover talked, Naruto looked over at Grover and wondered what they meant by the winter solstice. And wondered if it had to do with what the Fuhrer was looking for back at the museum. He also wondered if he and Percy were in more danger than he first thought. The next afternoon, Naruto and Percy were leaving the 3-hour Latin exam both mentally exhausted. The test was a lot harder than they thought it would be. Naruto had it a little bit easier as his memory helped a little. But Percy had it worse as the words kept swimming around and getting more jumbled. Even with all their studying, they weren't sure how well they had done. Both were worried that Mr. Brunner may have known they had heard his and Grover's conversation last night, but were relieved when he just called them over to hand them their grades. Percy had failed miserably and slumped, while Naruto had just barely got a passing grade. Percy, Mr. Brunner said. Don't be discouraged about leaving Yancy. It's for the best. Percy isn't going to take this well. Naruto thought as he noticed the downcast look on his face. Okay, sir. Percy mumbled. I mean, Mr. Brunner said, wheeling his chair back and forth, like he wasn't sure what to say. This isn't the right place for you. It was only a matter of time, right? Percy said, trembling. No, Mr. Brunner said. Oh, confound it all. What I'm trying to say is you're not normal, Percy. That's nothing to be thanks, Percy blurted out. Thanks a lot, sir, for reminding me. Percy then picked up his backpack and walked out. That could have gone better, Naruto said as Mr. Brunner looked to where Percy left and nodded. Perhaps I was a little hard on him, Mr. Brunner said aloud. You're just looking out for him. What person in a place of authority doesn't want that for the people they take care of? Naruto said, getting a nod of appreciation from Mr. Brunner. Well, what about you, Mr. Namikaze? What will you be doing now? Mr. Brunner asked, getting a serious look from Naruto. Some things have come up. I'll be going back to the orphanage earlier than expected to do some last-minute stuff. I have a feeling me and Percy will be joining you earlier at camp than expected, Naruto said seriously, getting a nod from Mr. Brunner. Well then, keep yourself safe till then, Mr. Brunner said, getting a nod from Naruto. You may want to watch for the next few days for you, sir. See you later, Mr. B. Naruto said as he grabbed his stuff and headed to the door. I'll do that, Mr. Namikaze. Goodbye, Mr. Brunner said before getting a contemplative look on his face. Later on that day, Naruto sat on the bus with Percy and Grover, heading to the bus terminal with many other kids from their school on board. Naruto had already told Percy and Grover his plans of heading to the orphanage earlier than expected, saying something had come up. Grover was being really jumpy during the ride, looking around everywhere. Percy finally got fed up with it and asked him, looking for kindly wands. Grover nearly jumped out of his seat and had a look that made him look like he was having a heart attack. What do you mean? He finally asked. We kind of overheard your conversation with Mr. Brunner last night. What was that all about? Percy asked while Naruto gave him a serious nod. Grover's eye twitched. How much did you hear? Not much. What's the solstice deadline? Naruto asked seriously. It's nothing, I was just talking to Mr. Brunner about how you guys might be getting overstressed or something cause of you believing in this Mrs. Dodd's character, Grover started before getting interrupted by Naruto. You're a really bad liar, Grover, Naruto said, pointing at his ears. Whenever you lie, your ears get bright pink like they are now. Grover pulled out some grubby business cards from his front pocket. Just take these, okay? In case you need me this summer. The card was in fancy script, which was murder on Naruto and Percy's dyslexic eyes, but they finally made out something like, Grover Underwood, Keeper, Blood Hill, Long Island, New York, 800-009-009. Well, fancy writing. Something a big business would have, Naruto said. Grover, Percy said. What exactly are you supposed to be protecting us from? He asked. However, before Grover could answer, there was a huge grinding noise under their feet. Black smoke began to pour out of the dashboard and the whole bus filled with the smell of rotten eggs. Everyone out, the bus driver called, causing people to groan, as he pulled over to the side of the road. Well, this is just messed up, Naruto said as everyone began peeling of the bus, and he noticed they were on some old country road. Hey, what are they staring at? Percy called, getting Naruto's and Grover's attention. Percy pointed to the other side of the road and they saw what looked like an old fruit stand. There was a whole variety of different colored fruit in the stand, making it look very colorful and tropical. However, there were 3 old ladies to the side of it in rocking chairs knitting one humongous sock. All 3 women looked very ancient in everyone's eyes, with pale faces wrinkled like fruit leather, silver hair tied back in white bandanas, and bony arms sticking out of bleached cotton dresses. Naruto narrowed his eyes when he realized they were looking right at Percy. No, 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 Grover muttered under his breath as a look of terror appeared on his face. Tell me they're not looking at you, Percy. They are, aren't they? He finally asked. Yeah, weird, huh? Percy said in a disbelieving tone. You think those socks would fit me? Naruto gave Percy a disbelieving look at that, then narrowed his eyes back on the old ladies. This isn't the time to joke. Come on, let's get back on the bus, Grover said, grabbing both boys' arms. Hey, watch it, they both said before audible snip could be heard. They looked over to see that the yarn that one of the elderly ladies had in her hands was now cut by a giant pair of scissors another was holding. Naruto's eyes widened at the implications that could mean for Percy. No, 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 Grover kept muttering before he scuffled to the front of the bus and kicked it as hard as he could. Surprisingly, the bus shuddered, and the engine roared back to life. The passengers cheered. Darn right, yelled the driver. He slapped the bus with his hat. Everyone back on board. Good thinking, kid, he said, giving Grover a pat on the back. Come on, let's get back on the bus, Grover said, dragging them back on. When Naruto and Percy looked back to the other side of the road, they were surprised to see that the old ladies were gone with no trace they were ever there. What the hell? Percy thought. I saw them there, I know I did. Naruto was lost in thought at that moment and nodded absent-mindedly to himself. As everyone get back on the bus and retook their seats, Grover was muttering quietly to himself, but Naruto and Percy heard what he was saying. This is not happening. This can't be like last time. I cannot fail again. I already let Thalia down, I can't let them down too. They heard him say. Percy looked over at Grover then, as Naruto was still lost in thought. Let who down? Who is this Thalia girl? You got a girlfriend that we don't know about, Grover? Percy asked him. No, Grover said, waving his arms in front of him. It's nothing but Percy. Naruto, you guys have to be careful, please. I can't protect you when you ask too many questions. Naruto gave Grover a deadpan look at that, while Percy looked at him skeptically. How was Grover supposed to protect them? They normally protected him. Grover, what the hell is going on? Percy asked, getting frustrated. What do you mean protect us? Grover looked around worried. Let me walk you home from the bus station, Percy. Promise me. Grover asked hurriedly. He was looking at him mournfully like he was already picking the kinds of flowers for his funeral, so Percy agreed, figuring that if he didn't, Grover would just freak out some more and draw attention to them. The rest of the journey back was silent before they finally arrived at the bus terminal. Well, I'll see you guys later sometime, Naruto said as he patted them both on the back and gave Grover a meaningful look, to which Grover nodded. Naruto then went and jumped onto his transfer bus, but looked back just in time to see Grover run to the bathroom and Percy jump into a cab, and shook his head sadly. A few hours later, Naruto had just walked into the front door of the orphanage and was looking around for Stephanie. Naruto, what are you doing back now? I thought you said you were going to be gone for a few more days? Stephanie asked him from the second-floor landing. Some things came up. Can we talk in your office privately? Naruto asked her, receiving a nod and a wave to come on up. Once they were in her office, Naruto explained what had happened this year at the school. When he was done, they both had a grave looks on their faces. I see from what you've told me your friend probably will end up on the run from something and won't get to Camp Half-Blood till sometime tonight, probably after midnight, Stephanie said thoughtfully. Yeah, I had the same thought on the matter, Naruto said in exhaustion. Well, from what we have figured out, we know you have about 4 or 5 hours before you will need to head out. Why don't you go get all your stuff ready and make sure Kurama knows when to be ready to go, then rest for a while, Stephanie suggested, receiving a nod from Naruto, who got up and left the room after giving her a hug. Naruto entered his room and looked around, gauging what he would need to pack for his trip to Camp Half-Blood later tonight. Finally, he just decided to pack his version of a survival pack, which consisted of rope, first aid kit including 2 small squares of ambrosia and a vial of nectar, his extra katana and bow and arrows, a sleeping bag and tent, and some food. He also put his shoe knife into his boot for a hidden weapon. He then went outside to look for Kurama, who had decided back at the academy to make his own way home instead of riding the bus. He found him curled up at the base of a tree resting. He whistled and Kurama jumped up and was instantly at his side. We will be heading out tonight 2 hours before midnight for Camp Half-Blood, Naruto told Kurama as he looked down at him. Okay boss, I'll be ready then, Kurama yipped out. Good. Because some things happened on the way to the bus terminal that makes me think Percy will be making his way there tonight as well, whether he wants to or not, and whether he truly knows or not, Naruto said as he looked out at the area in thought. I want to ask what happened, but I'll be ready if we run into them, Kurama yipped out again. Good, now come on, we're going to rest for a while, Naruto said as he led the way back to his room and laid down on his bed. Later that night around midnight, Naruto and Kurama were running as fast as they could down the road towards Half-Blood Hill. They had just seen lighting art down on the road ahead of them and heard an explosion. Naruto, knowing it was probably Percy, took off running while ordering Kurama to take his bigger form that was the size of a hellhound. Naruto's mind was racing over what creature could be attacking Percy and coming up with strategies to defeat it. As they crested the hill, Naruto cursed as he saw the Minotaur charging Percy, and he knocked his bow ready to fire an arrow. But his jaw dropped for a moment at what he saw happen next. Percy, in a moment of rage, had jumped at the Minotaur but went higher than expected and landed on its head. Naruto then saw him break off one of its horns but then get thrown off to the ground next to Percy. Naruto then used a Zippo to light the end of his arrow on fire and shot it at the monsters, hitting it in the leg. Naruto then ran forward as the monster bellowed in pain. He had already returned his bow to its pendant form on his necklace and changed his zippo into its katana form. Percy, grab Grover and run, I'll deal with this thing. Naruto shouted to get Percy's attention, also managing to get the monster's attention. It immediately charged him. Naruto, what are you doing here? Percy asked in confusion as he watched Naruto dodge the monster, then take a swing at it, cutting off its other horn. Now is not the time, Percy, just grab Grover and run. Naruto said, receiving a nod from Percy, who grabbed Grover and began to move as fast as he could to the tree his mom pointed to. The Minotaur, noticing Percy getting away, had refocused on him and charged. Percy was just a few steps away from the tree when he was hit from behind by the monster and flung past the tree, landing at the feet of two people before passing out. Naruto had cursed when he saw the monster had charged after Percy and had ordered Kurama after it. Kurama had took off after it at a dead sprint, reaching it at the same time as it hit Percy. Kurama had then swiped it across the throat with his claws, causing it to erupt in a shower of gold sparks. Good job, Kurama, let's go check on Percy and Grover, Naruto said when he reached him. He received a nod from Kurama, who had already changed back to his regular fox form, and they ran to where they saw Percy and Grover fall. Naruto saw Mr. Brunner and a girl looking over Grover and Percy, so he slowed his pace down and walked calmly towards them while checking out Mr. Brunner's new look. He was no longer in his wheelchair, but that didn't surprise Naruto much, as he had his suspicions on who he really was, and the next thing he saw confirmed them for him. Mr. Brunner had the lower half of a horse, marking him as a centaur. As he reached them, he noticed Mr. Brunner and the girl looking at him expectantly. Hello, Mr. Brunner, or should I say Chiron, Naruto said as he bent down and picked up Kurama. He then looked at the girl and asked, and you are? I'm Annabeth Chase, the girl answered. Naruto Namikaze, Naruto said, nodding his head to her. He looked at Grover and Percy. They're unconscious, aren't they? He asked, receiving a nod from them both. Bring them inside, Chiron said. A few moments later, it's good to see you again, Chiron, Naruto said. It's good to see you again too, Naruto, Chiron said. It seems you were right about us needing to keep an eye out for you and Percy, he added. Chiron, who is this? Annabeth asked as she re-entered the room after checking on Percy and Grover. Oh, forgive me, Annabeth, this is Naruto, Chiron said, nodding his head to her. He is the boy I was telling you about that was staying at Stephanie's orphanage, he added after a moment. Oh, okay, that explains why he wasn't freaking out when he saw you, Annabeth said after thinking for a moment. Now then, Naruto, I will have a camper show you around and show you your cabin for later. Then you can come back here, and once Percy wakes up we will talk more, Chiron said as he walked towards the door. Alright then, Naruto said as he followed him out. Annabeth, please keep an eye on Percy, please, Chiron asked, receiving a nod from her. Once they were outside, Naruto looked around and whistled appreciatively. This place was huge. He noticed the hill from before was to their left and not far from them. He also noticed a group of cabins in a U-shaped pattern. Claris, Selena, come here please, Chiron shouted out to two girls off to the side of the cabins. Both girls looked up and saw Chiron and one of the new guys everyone was talking about. Naruto noticed that they were both pretty tall, but that one of them was a more petite girl with long black hair and blue eyes, while the other was more athletically built with a gruffer look and a fighter's appearance. She had red eyes and shorter black hair. Naruto thought they both looked pretty cute. What? The gruffer-looking girl asked as they reached them. Claris, I would like you and Selena to show Naruto here around the camp. I will have Annabeth show Percy around later when he wakes up, Chiron said to them. Fine, got to welcome the newbie anyway, Claris said with an evil smirk while Selena sighed. Naruto just raised an eyebrow at her. So you're Claris and Selena? Naruto asked. Well, I'm Naruto Namikaze, he added. Well, it's nice to meet you, Naruto, Selena said, smiling. Claris just nodded her head to him. Well, come on, we haven't got all day, Claris said, already walking away. Selena sighed again and gestured at Naruto to follow them. They soon caught up to her, and Selena and Claris started to point out things in the camp as they showed him around. They passed the dining pavilion, the camp store, the armory, the stables, the archery range, the canoeing lake, the sing-along amphitheater, and the arena. As they passed each of them, either Claris or Selena would comment on it. Naruto had smirked when he saw the archery range and the arena. They soon ended up back where they began, and Claris and Selena then led him towards the center of the cabins. Okay, listen closely because I'm only going to say this once. There are 12 cabins in all, each one representing one of the 12 Olympian gods it was made for. Their kids are the only ones who live in there, Clarice explained to him, receiving a nod from Naruto. Since you have just arrived and your Olympian parent hasn't claimed you yet, you will be staying in cabin 11, the Hermes Cabin, Selena added, getting another nod from Naruto. Whose kids are you two? Naruto asked them. The god of war, Clarice said, pointing to a red cabin with a 5 on the door. The goddess of love, Selena said, pointing to a cabin with a blue roof and a 10 on the door. Naruto nodded at their answers and asked them to continue. Right, now we have the rest of the cabins. Number 1 is Zeus and it's vacant, number 2 is Hera and it's honorary, number 3 is Poseidon and it's vacant, number 4 is Demeter, number 5 is, as you know, Ares, number 6 is Athena, number 7 is Apollo, number 8 is Artemis, which is mostly honorary except for when the hunters come, number 9 is Hephaestus, number 10 is, as you know, Aphrodite, number 11 is, as you know, Hermes, and number 12 is Dionysus, Clarice explained, with Selena adding stuff in. Naruto looked at the cabins and nodded while noting there weren't any cabins for the minor gods and goddesses or for Hades or Hestia. Now it's time to officially welcome you, Clarice said, grinning wickedly, causing Selena to sigh. Others in the area grimaced at her words. Clarice was breaking in another newbie. Clarice quickly lunged forward, trying to get Naruto into a headlock, but her eyes widened when he simply sidestepped her, causing her to land hard on the ground. Selena and the others in the area had broke out into giggles when she hit the ground. Clarice was about to jump to her feet and try again when she suddenly froze at the feeling of a knife at her throat. Everyone else had also got quit at that. That was a good try, Clarice, but I have been training in combat since I could walk, Naruto said as he moved the knife away from her throat and held out his hand to her. Clarice blushed at being seen losing against a newbie but accepted his help up. You got lucky this time, Naruto, Clarice said as she caught her balance. Sure he did, Clarice, Selena said while giggling, receiving a glare from Clarice. Well, how about you girls lead me back to the big house so Chiron knows the tour is done, Naruto said, trying to make sure they didn't get into an argument. Both Clarice and Selena nodded at that and lead him away. Once they were in the big house, Clarice and Selena turned to him. Well, Naruto, this is the end of the tour, Selena said, with Clarice nodding. Yeah, it was nice meeting you girls, see you later, Naruto said while giving them a little wave as they began to walk away. Both girls waved back, then turned around and Naruto saw them become deep in conversation with each other. Naruto then walked into the living room where he saw Chiron playing a card game with someone he hadn't met yet. He also noticed he was back in his wheelchair. Oh, Naruto, welcome back. I see Clarice's little welcome plan didn't work, Chiron said when he finally noticed him. Yeah, it'll take more than that to get me, Naruto said while laughing. He then looked around at the other guy. Oh yes, Naruto, let me introduce you to Mr. D, Chiron said as he noticed Naruto looking at the guy. Naruto looked the guy over and noticed he had bloodshot eyes, while wearing a leopard print shirt. He had messy black hair and was rocking the bearded look, and had a Diet Coke can in his hand. Well, I guess I must say it. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood, Mr. D said in an annoyed voice. Well, let's see, you have an attitude, look like you are experiencing a constant hangover, and you smell a little like grapes. You must be the wine god, nice to meet you, Naruto said in a cheery tone of voice. Well, you're correct. It's good to see not all demigods first arriving here are idiots, Dionysus said with a small smile. It's not that difficult, you just have to know what to look for, Naruto said, then turned to look at Chiron expectantly. Well, since Percy won't be fully awake till tomorrow, I would like you to stay near here, Chiron said to him when he noticed his look. Will do, sir, see you guys later, Naruto said, giving a little wave as he left the room. Well, that boy seems like he won't have much trouble fitting into our world, Mr. D commented as he turned back to his cards. Yes, I totally agree with you, Mr. D, Chiron said back as he placed his cards down. Naruto was just leaving the front door of the big house when he heard a shout of frustration from inside and snickered as he walked off. I hope you all liked the video, and if you all want the next part of this video, please like the video and comment 3 hearts. Please subscribe to my channel so whenever I upload a video you will notify.